You know, language is quite an amazing thing, but it's an abstraction. For example, if a big cow walked down the aisle of the church and was standing here in front of all of our eyes, we'd see the cow. It's materially right there in front of us. And then if I said, well, look, there's a cow. The cow is not the word cow. That's an abstraction. That's a description. Now, if the cow left and a new group of people came in, I said, there was a cow in church today. They'd all get what I said, but there would be no cow. It's just the description. It's the abstraction in language to describe that a cow was there. Make sense? Okay. We use these abstractions all the time. We're passing around concepts. Now, again, the cow could be black, it could be brown, it could be big, it could be little, all kinds of descriptions, but we would get the basic concept of the cow. The Scripture is loaded with this kind of language, but it's an abstraction, and sometimes there's an abstraction on an abstraction, and that's the case today. But we start with the description, the abstraction about the theme that is all the readings today, and it has to do with complaining and murmuring and giving up, and it's all negative. So we have Elijah. He comes to this broom tree, lays down to rest, and then an angel wakes him up. Now, actually, before he does, he starts the murmuring and complaining. He says, my life is over, Lord, take me. I'm just like my dad. Now, I don't know about you, but that's me. I'm pretty good at handling illness and aches and pains, and after you get 50 and over 60, for sure, you start feeling every day you turn and some new pain pops up. But I can handle most all of those, except two things that I really, really hate. I'll tell you the second one first. The second one is when I'm sick to my stomach and I need to, well, I won't use the abstraction and tell you, but I need to get rid of it, you know? I hate that feeling. That's one I truly am disgusted by. But the worst one is catching a cold. Yeah. All my life I've caught, I haven't had one for a year and a half, I don't know what's going on, but all my life I'd get really awful head colds, terrible. And my eyes and my nose, I just would be, my head pounding, I'd be miserable. And I'd say this almost every cold, Lord, take my life, I want to get out of it, take me. And he never did. That's Elijah. So he goes to sleep. He's ready to die. And then an angel comes, wakes him up and says, eat and drink. So he eats his hearth cake and drinks and goes back to sleep. God has somehow provided, it's miraculous in this story, just magical, this food. He goes back to rest and the angel wakes him again, says, eat and drink, because you're going to go on a journey. And then the story says he goes on a journey for 40 days and nights. Magical numbers. But the point is that God has provided for him, given him what he's needed for his strength, in spite of his complaining. Then the second reading, Paul lists about 6 or 7 negative things, complaining and misery and all this stuff that we often engage in, that just drags down our spirit, our own inner murmuring and complaining. And then we get another explicit expression of this in the gospel, and it says that the people were murmuring against Jesus, murmuring against him because he said he had come down from heaven. And so they say, what? How ridiculous. We know his mom, we know his dad. He didn't come down from heaven. How can he say that? And he says, stop your murmuring. Stop it. And then he says in language, not an abstraction, but an abstraction on top of an abstraction, because he says, I am the bread of life. If you eat this bread, if you eat me, you'll live forever. Now that's just weird. What does that mean? It's an abstraction on an abstraction. How do you figure out what that is about? If you eat me, you will live forever, you'll never die. Now, of course, we know it's not physical. I've given communion to all kinds of people who have died. I've taken communion myself, and I know I'll die. It's nothing about physical. And it's not that Jesus is physically in that bread, but somehow he is trying to connect with us, and it makes it so explicit, although it's abstracted. Eat this bread, drink this wine, eat my body, drink my blood, and I will be in you. And it's so important, and yet it's a little strange to understand, maybe even to believe. I was on a cruise several years ago, and I was in the dance room where everybody's dancing, and I didn't feel like dancing, so I was sitting there having a little Cabernet Sauvignon. It was wonderful. Sipping my wine and watching people dance, and all of a sudden my eyes land on this guy that was the worst, freakiest dancer I've ever seen in my life. He was the worst. It was this kind of dancing. And just do it for the longest. It just kept it up. I first started laughing. Well, I wasn't rude. I was smiling. But inside I was, oh my God, that's a freaky show there. Then I moved to a second phase, and it was judgment. And I said, he just shouldn't be on the dance floor. That wasn't embarrassment. Oh, that's not dancing. And I catch myself doing this, and then I moved to the next phase, and I did start to laugh, but it wasn't laughing at him. I started to enjoy him like I couldn't believe. He just was so into it. And then I came to this appreciation. He's the best dancer on the whole floor. He really is. This man is so totally into the dance. He is so one with the dance. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. He doesn't care if they're laughing at him. They don't even exist. He was just dancing. And his spirit was with the dance. It made me think of this. I tried to remember, someone wrote it out for me. You've heard that phrase before. It says, dance like no one is watching. That's for sure he was. Sing like no one is listening. You ever heard one of those singers? I am the bread of life. Oh my God. Love like you've never been hurt. Oh, that's good. Love like you've never been hurt. Hate me, that's okay. Still love you. Live like it's heaven on earth. That's what that guy was doing. He was so totally into the dance, it just didn't matter what was going on around him. And I kind of envied him. This man discovered, he found it. He found the dance inside himself. And if I had to use an image to try to describe what Jesus is saying, it's that. Somehow, he says, I am the bread of life, come down from heaven. That material bread, the manna that God sent down upon the Jews, the Israelites, your ancestors, they all died. They ate it and died. But if you eat this bread, you'll live forever. You'll never die. Now, we rule out immediately physical because, again, we all have relatives and friends who have died, and they went to communion all the time. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about this inner dance, this inner song, this inner life that we discover when we truly discover Jesus. And it's not the host. It's so much more than the host. The host is the door. The host is the entrance. The host is the opportunity, the invitation. As we eat and drink of the Eucharist, what we're really trying to do is enter into the dance. We're to lose it. We're to discover the dance so wonderfully and so wild that we just go. And when we discover Jesus Christ in this way, it's His teaching. It's His compassion. He didn't heal people because it was His job. He saw people suffering and He felt compassion for them, and then healing power went out of Him. People came to Him and begged and pleaded. He wasn't bothered. He wasn't put out. He responded in love. He said, "What do you want? What would you like me to do for you? What can I give you?" And when we discover that Jesus Christ in us, when we connect with that, and how else to do it? You got to eat it. You got to drink it. You got to get it inside of you. So that when we eat and drink of the Lord, and we do that easily in receiving the Eucharist, we eat and drink of the Lord, this life happens inside of us. Commercial. I'm giving another retreat on Jesus on the 25th of this month, August, from 9 to 3:30. Some of you have been on it. It's a day of just listening to Jesus teach us. He says what He wants us to do as His disciples. Follow me, do this, do this. It's about compassion. It's about forgiveness. It's about unconditional love. It's about serving. And when we discover in His words, in His teaching, in His example, we're eating and drinking of the Lord. Eucharist is just that outward expression. Eucharist is a kind of abstraction from the reality. The reality is the dance. It's in us. So all I know is, once upon a time, I saw the best dancer in all my life. And he didn't do one right step. He didn't. He didn't have a clue what the rules were of dancing. But man, was he dancing. Was he dancing. Today, we're invited into the dance. We're invited into the life. We're invited to have the life come into us. And once we get it, once we discover it, we'll never be the same.